Shavua Tov. Thank you, Alicia. And whatever, you left me the papers here. I could say the same thing again, huh? But thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me. Thank you all for joining. I think it's such an unbelievable thing that I have such pleasure when you come to a place, especially on Motzei Shabbat, at 11 o'clock at night, when most people, whatever it is that they're doing, you're coming over here before a little people are going and they're starting to get ready for Rosh Hashanah. It's something so beautiful, and a special thanks to the Az Yashir Synagogue for going and doing this, not only this time, but every single year. Most organizations, they do the week before Rosh Hashanah, 2 weeks before. Here already, they're preparing already almost 4 weeks before to getting ready for Rosh Hashanah. It's really unbelievable. And may you have tremendous amount of siyata d'shmaya and hatzlacha in all that you do. Imagine last year, after Rosh Hashanah, some guy comes up to you. He's wearing a white cape. He's got tinfoil on his head. And he says, by the way, I just came from heaven, and I want to tell you what this year is going to bring. And he goes and he says, for this year, Times Square is going to be closed. There's not going to be a person walking it for weeks on end. You're like, okay, this guy's crazy. Then he says, businesses are going to be closed for months. Schools are going to be closed. People are going to be homeschooled. Like, there's no way that that's happening. Then he goes and says, hospitals are going to be full. Planes will not take off. Countries will be on lockdown. So at this point, you're thinking either he's crazy or it's World War III. And then he comes and he tells you this. And he says, the hottest commodity, the most difficult purchase that you're going to be able to buy is going to be toilet paper. Then you know for sure he's crazy. You can't make this stuff up. You can't. And this is what, all this was decreed last Rosh Hashanah. And it's so unfortunate. There's so many of our family and friends that are no longer here due to the coronavirus situation. And when we think about it, it really puts in our mind, getting ready to, this year, who knows what's going to bring this year? The place where I pray on Rosh Hashanah, people always bring up what happened the previous Rosh Hashanah. And it always makes you scared because you have people that are not here anymore. I know way too many people that were here last year and not here anymore. And that's a very scary thought. And this is something that we can sort of do something about for ourselves for this coming Rosh Hashanah. How are we going to go and make sure that we have a most successful and amazing year? So we all know, Elul, there's an acronym, Ani lo dodi v'dodi li. I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. Rabbi Shimshon Pincus goes and explains, and he says that this is a time where HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God is close. We're able to go and acquire a relationship with God. Now, this is not a temporary relationship because the term is over here that you're using is beloved. Beloved means something that's strong, something that's long-term, something that's a real relationship. And it's very unfortunate when you look at, the way that most of us, when we deal with Judaism, with Yiddishkeit, it's sort of we just push buttons. We got to pray, okay, let's go pray. We got to do chesed, okay, let's do chesed. We got to do this, so we do this. But we do it without even thinking. We just do the things without putting any emotion into it, without putting any understanding into it. This is what Elul comes. Elul comes that you start building a relationship. God is home. God is here, and we have the ability to build this relationship. There was once a father who used to travel a lot in business. He had 3 boys at home. And after 1 month away, he comes home, and the boys are all in the rooms. And he has a 5-year-old, he has a 10-year-old, and he has a 15-year-old. And he's going to go to each boy's room to say, hi, Daddy's home. He knocks on the first door, he opens it up, it's his 5-year-old. His 5-year-old was in bed already, he jumps up, he's like, Daddy! Daddy's home! He runs and he gives him the biggest hug. And he gives him the biggest kiss. He holds him so tight. And the father right then is thinking, he's like, there's no money in the world that's worth more than just what I have right here. Says hello to his son, goes into the next son, the 10-year-old. Knocks on the door, and before he opens the door, he overhears his son, his 10-year-old son is on the phone to his friend. And he says, oh, yeah, my father's coming home. He's probably home now. He says, now I have to go, and I have to behave properly because my father's very strict, and if I don't do this, he's going to scream at me. If I don't do that, he's going to scream at me. And now I have to make sure I'm my best behavior. Now, the father's hearing this, gets hurt a little bit, but, it is what it is. He opens the door. He's like, hey, Dad, they exchange their pleasantries, and then he moves on to the next son, the 15-year-old. He knocks on the door from the 15-year-old son. All he gets is a grunt. I don't know here who people have teenagers. There's like grunting stage where they don't speak. I know specifically boys. There's a stage where they just speak by and the parents know this means that he's hungry, just like a baby. You know, by the cry, you know that this means that he's hungry, this, and needs a diaper change. There's like a span where they grunt. He knocks on his 15-year-old boy's door, grunts. He's, hi, I'm home. Doesn't even look. Completely ignores him. He's like, don't you want to say hello to your father? Ignores him completely. Not wanting to start anything, he just came back, closes the door, and leaves. Says, look at the difference. You have here the 5-year-old so excited to see his father. The 10-year-old who has now to be a little bit careful. The 15-year-old couldn't care less. But the truth is, this is how we treat Elul. You have people that come to Elul like the 5-year-old, be like, Daddy's home. Now's the time to build a relationship. Let's go. Let's get close to God. And they're so excited, they want to give God, so to speak, a hug. Then you have the 10-year-olds. The 10-year-olds are the people that are like, you know what? Rosh Hashanah is coming up. I need business, I need shidduch, I need panasad, I need this. I realize panasad is always twice, 3 times, 4 times throughout the same cycle. And we need this, we need that. So you know what? Come on. You know, I have to be good. I have to be a good boy. I have to be a good girl because I want to have a shopping list for God. And now, in order for me to get that, I have to be on my best behavior. That you have the 10-year-old. Then you have the 15-year-old. The 15-year-old are the people that live life as nothing has changed. Elul, Av, Tishrei, it doesn't make a difference. Their business as regular. Everything is life as usual. Now, when you look at the difference between the 5-year-old, the 10-year-old, and the 15-year-old, what's really the difference? The difference is perception. What's perception? You have perception is how you perceive reality. You know, the famous example, in order to explain this, is you have a glass that's half full, or some say that it's half empty. What's the difference? It's how you perceive it. Either you look at it as half full, or you look at it as half empty. When you look at the scenario where the father came home after a month, all the kids see the exact same thing, Daddy's home. But they perceive it differently. The 5-year-old is so happy. The 10-year-old is a little bit nervous. The 15-year-old couldn't care less. So all that it changes in us when it comes to Elul, you know what changes and how we perceive it? It all depends on how we perceive life, how we perceive Elul, how we perceive God. You know, a lot of psychologists goes and bring down the concept of perception and how some people have a very negative perception where they think that everybody's out to get them. Everybody is against them. And that's why they'll be defensive if you talk about them negatively. That's why they'll feel very victim-like. They'll be in a state, as a psychologist call it, a state of unhappiness. They're always going to be unhappy because that's how they perceive people. Perception shapes our reality. The way that we perceive people is the way that we change our reality and how we see ourselves, how we see our relationships, and most importantly, how we see God and how we see the Torah. You have 2 people that come to a shiur Torah. Both of them sit right next to each other. Both of them hear the exact same shiur Torah. One leaves saying, wow, that blew my mind. I'm going to change my life forever. The other guy is like, it was all right. Guy screamed a little bit, blocked some letters over here. I didn't think he was this tall. And then you go and you leave your life. What changed? What was the difference between one person and another? They sat right next to each other. They heard the entire shiur Torah. What was the difference? The difference is how you perceived it. Do you want to be inspired? Do you want to change? Then you'll see the light. You'll see the ability to do so. But if you couldn't care less, then you're not going to be able to. Maybe the best example I give you is for people that follow sports is you have 2 people, let's say, go to a football game. They both sit right next to each other. They watch and they involved in the same exact game. One person lives like it's Tisha B'Av. He's ready to, start mourning. He's like, that is the worst game ever. I can't believe that it was ridiculous. The other person, he's on a high. He's like, this is the best game of my life. And they're so happy. This person is in mourning, 7 weeks of Elul. You can't talk to him. His team, passed away, so to speak. The other person is Sheva Brachot. He's in the 7th heaven. How is it they both looked and they watched the same game? How is it that one person is so upset and one person is so happy? How is it possible when they saw the same thing? The answer is it depends what city they grew up in. This person grew up in New York. This person grew up in Dallas. Say New York won. I don't know who's a better team. Let's say New York won. So the people from New York are so happy. It was the greatest game. The people from Dallas, They're upset. That's the worst game ever. You see the same reality. You see the same thing, but it all depends on your perception. There was once a young boy, 24-year-old, by the name of Joey. Now, Joey, he had his grandmother in a nursing home, and he was very makpid every week to go and visit her. Not every day he would get the same time, not whenever he has a chance, but at least once a week, he goes to visit her. One day he goes and he's visiting her, and he notices a young, beautiful woman walking from room to room. She has a stack of magazines, books, cookies, all these snacks. She wheels it in, and she starts handing people out, saying some nice words, how are you? And then schmooze a little bit and move on to the next one. This woman comes to Joey's grandmother and also says, how are you, Mrs. Schwartz? How's everything? Here's what you requested last time, and starts schmoozing with her, and then she leaves. Joey's like, who is that? And she's like, oh, Sarah. Sarah's a sweetheart. She comes in here once a week, and she goes from room to room, and we tell her what we want, and she brings either cookies or cake or fruits or books or magazines, whatever it is that she wants. She comes, she's a volunteer, she comes once a week. Joey's like, wow, that's very nice. And continued life as usual. Next week, Joey comes. Guess who happens to come at the same time? Sarah's there at the same time. And he's like, oh, and he sees her. And this, as luck would have it, week after week, for the next 4 weeks, Joey comes exactly the same time as Sarah. Finally, he starts seeing her. He's like, wow, she's really special. She's a young, beautiful woman, and he is a young, let's call it beautiful man. In the same time of the shidduchim, he's like, you know what, maybe we could arrange something. So he calls a shadchan and tries to arrange something. The shadchan says, sure. He gives her all the information, and he says, she's Sarah from the nursing home. And the shadchan says, you got to give me more than that. Baruch Hashem, in our community, we have so many girls visiting the nursing homes. You got to give me more. So Joey says, okay, let me do some research. And let's just say that Joey did a little bit too much research. He knew a lot about Sarah after this. And he goes and says, listen, she lives over here. She goes to this school. She drives this car. And she likes this color. And who's going on it. So the shadchan says, okay, I got it. He makes some phone calls, calls the parents and says, listen, I have a possible shidduch for your daughter. And they send over the resume, and the parents, after a few days, says, it's not really for us. So the shadchan says, okay, fine. He goes back to the boy, says, they're not really interested. The boy says, okay, I tried. Over the next few weeks, he keeps on seeing Sarah over there. And, he starts becoming infatuated. He knows so much about her, after all. And he's like, okay, let me try a different shadchan. And he tries a different shadchan, and again, negative, he gets declined every time. Finally, he says, why don't they, what's wrong with me? What's going on? And he pressures the shadchan, and the shadchan says, listen, he says, you come from a certain family, certain community, and this particular family is very well-to-do, very well-respected, very well-off financially, and you just don't match up. So Joey said, okay, fine. But he couldn't let it go. Eventually, he decided he's going to pick up the guts and try to go and make the shidduch himself. He walks over to Sarah one day when she was in the nursing home, and he tried to set something up. It didn't go. She respectfully declined. Joey said, at this point, fine. I understand. It's not going to happen. And he starts thinking, he says, she's such a good girl. She does so much chesed, so much good for the community. Let me do something for her. He knew where she lives. He knew what car she drove. He knew everything. He decided what he's going to do is every morning, he's going to wake up early, and he's going to put a flower on her car. And that's it. So he wakes up early in the morning. He decides today is going to be a rose, and he puts a flower on the car. And days go by. Every day he puts another flower on the car. And eventually she's like, what's going on over here? Who is this? That's constantly putting on, the father was never, they're going to call the police. There's someone following my daughter around. Wherever she parks, he has a flower on the car. And she decides that she's going to, one day wake up early to see who's putting this flower. So she wakes up 2 hours before her normal time, and the flower is already there. She's like, who's coming in the crack of dawn to put it? She wakes up 4 hours beforehand, and she sees, Baruch Hashem, no flower. Within 3 minutes, after she's looking at her car with her binoculars, she's sitting over there, she's, seeing who's coming. Up comes, this old car. Out comes Joey, puts a flower and walks away. She sees him, she runs out, and she's like, stop! And he's like, oh, what's going on? Yeah, hey, how are you? And she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, nothing, what are you doing? And she's like, do you put the flour on my car every day? And he's like, what flour? What are you talking about? And she's like, no, come on, like, stop playing. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, listen, like, I'm not doing this that, you'll find out and be like, oh, and you'll fall in love with me and we'll get married and we'll happily have it. He's like, no, like, I understand it's not going to happen. But he said, I see that you do so much chesed for somebody else, so many other people. You make so many people happy. I said, who makes you happy? I said, let me put a flower, let me make you put a smile on your day, in the beginning of the day. And she's like, it's very sweet, but, it's really unnecessary. And they part. Joey didn't stop. Next day, kept on coming flowers. About a month or two goes by like this, and he keeps on putting the flowers. Now already the family knows. They call him Rose Boy. This is the guy that comes in, puts the flowers, and whatever. They live life as regular. She sees the flowers, she chucks it in the back seat with all the other flowers, and she drives as regular. Time goes by, and Joey keeps on putting the flower. And one day he notices the flower from yesterday is still there. And he's like, all right, let me swap it out, put it in a fresh one, and he moves on. The next day he sees the flower from yesterday still there. And he's like, maybe she's on vacation. A week, 2 weeks go by, same flower. So after a month, he starts, making some phone calls, like, is everything okay? What's going on? And nobody wants to tell him anything, obviously, because, he's an interesting guy. He calls his grandmother. He says, listen, when was the last time that Sarah came to visit you? And she says, I'm coming to think about it. She hasn't been here for like 6 weeks. And he starts calling family member and friends and this and that. Finally, they say that he gets like somebody who's able to like spill the beans. And they say, like, unfortunately, when Sarah was a little girl, she had some sort of kidney issue. But Baruch Hashem, it went away. And they thought, that's it. But all of a sudden, it came back that she had to be hospitalized. And now unfortunately, she's on dialysis. She's not well. And Joey's like, oh my gosh, is there anything I can do? They're like, no, don't worry. We got it taken care of. We got this. Joey, feels connected. He's constantly, giving Sarah flowers. He feels somewhat connected. So every few days he calls a hospital, he tries to get information, calls a family member. And as time goes on, unfortunately, it deteriorates, her condition. And as he finally finds some family member who's going to give him some information, and the family member tells him that, it's not looking good. And he's like, what do you mean it's not looking good? And they say, like, she's on a transplant list. And if she doesn't get a transplant soon, the prognosis is not good at all. So Joey says, like, what does that mean? And they were like, she doesn't have that much time. And he's like, so why don't they get the transplant? And the family's like, they're trying. It's very difficult. There's a long list. It's not working out. So Joey thinks for a day, for two, calls back again. How's she doing? Same thing. He calls the hospital and he says, listen, there's a certain girl over here, Sarah, but whatever, and I want to go, I want to test to see if I'm a match. And the hospital says, yeah, Bechavod, come down. They come down, they test. He gets a phone call 2 days later from the doctor. And the doctor says, Joey, you're a match. And there's silence on the other line. And Joey says, okay, let me think about it. Give me a few days. And over the next few days, every day he calls the family. Says, how's Sarah doing? Not doing good. Every day, any improvement? Nothing. Finally, after a week, he calls the doctor back and he says, doctor, I thought about it. I'm going to give her my kidney. But I have one condition. You cannot let her or the family know that it was me. And the doctor says, fine, anonymous donors, we have that all the time, not a problem at all. They call the family with the great news. They found a donor, everything is going to be good. And, simcha in the house. They get ready for the operation. And Baruch Hashem, the operation was successful. Joey gets out of the hospital a little bit early before Sarah, and life goes on as usual. As they get back together, Joey starts continuing again with the flowers, not mentioning anything. After about 2 years, this Sarah wasn't getting dates anymore. Beforehand, she was a girl without any medical issues, now, unfortunately, she has certain issues. She wasn't getting the dates that she used to. And she's getting older, and the parents are starting to worry what's going to be with Sarah. And suddenly the father thinks, what about the Rose Boy? He seems like a good boy. And Sarah's like, yeah, I guess so. And the mother's like, really, should we? They're like, listen, she's not getting any younger, making, the daughter feel good, the way parents do. And they go and they decide, what, let's set it up. They call Joey up and says, hey, are you still interested in shidduch? Joey says, what? Of course. I'll be there. He says, don't you need to know that? Don't worry about it. I got all the information. You just tell me what time. And they date, And it goes well, and they get married. There was one problem, though, is that Sarah felt that she settled. She's like, I got the guy that, it's because I couldn't get anybody else because of my medical condition or because of this. And, once a person feels that they settled, that's it. The marriage is going straight down. And slowly, a little fight over here and a little fight over here, and then started escalating. And Joey wasn't making as much money as her friends' husbands. Her friends had beautiful houses, beautiful cars. They would go on multiple vacations. And, their lifestyle was not this. Joey, he didn't have the ability to do that. And she would start screaming, make more money, come on, what's going on? And Joey says, I'm trying, I'm sorry, I can't. Whatever I'm doing, I'm not being successful. But he tries to make her happy. He leaves notes throughout the house. I love you, I care about you, you're so special. I'm so lucky that I married you. And she's like, yeah, you are so lucky that you married me. And she goes and she, throws it out. He leaves a little chocolate on her, by the pillows, by over there. And she starts chucking it out. He starts putting flowers by her car again. And she's like, enough with the flowers, enough with the chocolates. Stop spending money on this. Save the money. He says, fine, I'm sorry. 2 years go by. They have a baby, but the marriage is not getting any better. And then one day, Joey gets really sick. And he has to go to the hospital. And they tell him, says, this is from one of your pre-existing conditions from, a while back. And this was the straw that broke it. Sarah's like, wait a minute, you had a pre-existing condition? He's like, what do you mean? He's like, you hid something from me? I told you everything about me. You know about my transplant, you know about my history, you know about everything. And you hid this from me? She had enough. She's like, we need some space. And she goes and as she leaves the hospital, she's going to decide she's going to stay with her parents. But before she leaves the hospital, she goes over to the front desk and says, Joey's wife over there, can I please have a copy of the medical records? And they say, yeah, sure. We'll mail it to you. And she goes, she packs up her stuff, and she goes to her parents' house. A week goes by, she goes home, she decides that she wants to, pick up the mail, see how how everything is doing. Hasn't visited Joey once. As she sees in the mail, she notices, Joey's medical records. She completely forgot about it. She goes, and she starts opening it up. She's like, oh, who knows what I'm going to find over here? And she's like, starts talking to herself and starts moving it back and forth, see what she's going to get. And all of a sudden, she gets to his past medical history. And she sees over there transplant. And she's like, what? And she goes down, she starts reading it, she starts scanning, and then she sees her name. And then she sees the kidney, and then just words start flashing out. And she feels very faint. And she starts sitting down, she's like, wait a minute. And she starts plugging the pieces together. And she's overwhelmed with so much emotion, she runs straight to the hospital. She runs straight into Joey's room, and she barges in. The nurse is like, oh, who are you? What are you doing? He's like, I'm his wife. I need to come. She's like, I never saw you here once. She's like, I'm here now. She runs into the room. Joey's there. All these tubes and machines are plugged into him, and she's running, and she's crying, and she's like, Joey, it's me. Wake up, wake up. And the nurse runs in and says, don't shake the patient. And she's like, I need to wake him up. I need to tell him something. And he's like, you can't tell him something. He's in a coma. She's like, what do you mean he's in a coma? And the nurse says he's in a medically induced coma. And she's like, well, you got to wake him up. I need to tell him something. I need to tell him how sorry I am. I need to tell him how much I love him, how much I care about it. And the nurse says, I don't know what to tell you, but we can't wake him up. He has an infection. It's spread to his brain. We need to put him into this coma. So she calls a doctor and she tries doing, and nothing doing. They cannot do anything. She calls the doctor and says, how does it look? And the doctor says, to be honest, it doesn't look good for him. And she starts crying. She says, Doc, you gotta help me out of here. We gotta do something. And the doctor says, we're trying all treatments. We're trying all antibiotics. We're trying everything that we can. He's not responding to anything. She calls her parents. She's like, use every connection that you have. I don't care the cost. I want Joey back. And they start calling, getting the most expensive experimental treatments, and they're flying in doctors from all over the place. Every day, Sarah's in the hospital for 12 hours. She's holding Joey's hand. She's crying. She's like, Joey, I'm so sorry. Joey, please come back to me. It's your wife, Sarah. She talks to him nonstop, apologizing to this person in a coma. Finally, after about 2 weeks, the doctor says it looks like it's getting better. And it gets better and better until, Baruch Hashem, he finally gets out of the coma. Oh, the hug that his wife gave him. And she's like, you better not ever leave me again. And he's like, am I Gan Eden? What's going on over here? It's like, are you the same wife that I... And he didn't understand, but certain times when your wife says something, especially if it's good, you'll be like, yeah, sure, you don't respond. And a few weeks later, he gets healthy, he goes home. The Shalom Bayit was unbelievable. Sarah was the best wife, probably waited in hand for anything that he wanted. He coughed, what's wrong? You need something? Anything that he wanted, he got. The Shalom Bayit was legendary, was unbelievable. The question that we have to ask is, what changed? It's the same Joey, making the same money, looks the same way, has the same character trait, same personality. What changed? He didn't change. Sarah's perception, she herself, she changed. When she changed, then she saw how lucky she was to have this husband. She saw how special he is, and all of a sudden, from her perspective, he became the best person. He became the best husband, and the Shalom Bayit changed drastically from that. The Gemara in Kiddushin, right at the beginning, Daf Bet Amar Aleph, goes and says, where do we learn that you're supposed to go, and when you marry a woman, you're supposed to marry her with some sort of money? Now we use a ring, something of a value. And we learn it from Ephron. Ephron went and he had a cave. He had a special cave. Adam and Chava were in this cave. And Avraham wanted to go, and he wanted to bury Sarah in this cave. So he goes over to Ephron, and they want to make this deal. And they make the deal, 400 pieces of silver, and they go and they make the deal, and they each walk the separate way. The Gemara says, we use a similar terminology. It's called the Gezerah Shavah. There's the same terminology with Ephron and Avraham. The same terminology with when marrying a wife. You say over here, we learn Kicha Misdei Ephron. We learn that just like Avraham Avinu purchased a property with money, so too we marry a woman with money. Now you say this to the modern woman, it's not going to go over well. You're purchasing me? Oh, really? You're purchasing me? I purchased you. You're going to be, you're going to say that to a modern woman? Are you kidding me? So it looks derogatory. Why would the Gemara, there's such a holy union between a man and a woman when they get married, and we're learning this from a real estate purchase? The answer is beautiful. Ephron has a piece of desert that he wants to sell. And he says, and he sells it for an exorbitant amount of money, a tremendous amount of money. Ephron leaves the business deal thinking he just did the $1 million deal. He sold a piece of desert and a cave, for so much money. He is the lucky one of the deal. Avraham Avinu left that business deal. He says, I bought the cave where Adam and Chava is for 400. That's it? He says, I got the best deal. The Gemara is teaching us a very important lesson. When you go into a marriage, you have to think that you got the best end of the deal. You don't think, my wife, she's lucky that she has me. No. You'd be like, I am so lucky that I have her as my wife. And the wife says, I am so lucky that I have you. The biggest lesson is look at the lesson of Avraham and Ephron. Each one left the deal thinking they are the ones that got the better end of the deal. Sarah, in the story, she all of a sudden realized that she got the better end of the deal. And that changed their Shalom Bayit. It changed their relationship. The scary thing is that your perception changes your reality. Not only, it makes your reality. When we go and we look at Elul, it all depends on how you perceive it. Are you excited that God is here and you have the ability to build a relationship? Or maybe you're nervous and be like, I have to do good because then I want to have a good year. Or maybe you couldn't care less. It all depends on your perception. The Orachot Tzadikim brings down that if someone does a mitzvah with joy, the reward that you get from it is 1,000 times greater than if you did it and you felt it was a burden. And the Orachot Tzadikim furthermore goes and says, if you do a mitzvah out of humility, being humble, it's also 1,000 times greater than as if you did a mitzvah with arrogance. Imagine what happens when you do one mitzvah with joy and humility. That's 1,000 times 1,000. We could throw a little addition into this, is the Ben Ish Chai says when you do something, you learn Torah on Shabbat, it's 1,000 times the reward of during the week. Imagine how much reward you get if you learn on Shabbat with joy and humility. 1,000 times 1,000 times 1,000. Pretty sure that's like 1 billion. That's crazy. How much in Judaism, it's not just about, okay, we got to do this, now it's time to pray, let's push the praying button, now let's do this, now we got to push the chesed button, now we got to do it. No, there's so much more into it if you put your heart into it. Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. If you have that beloved, if you have that relationship, if you have that emotion, it adds thousands upon thousands of rewards to what you're getting already. You know, when people get close to the Yom Adin, get close to Rosh Hashanah, we all think we want to add new things. What are we going to take up on ourselves? And it's great, you should. But today I want to put a little twist to it. You want to add good. That's not what I'm bringing up today. Today I'm saying do what you're doing, but do it with a different emotion. Do it as if you're doing it for your beloved. Do it as if it's ani l'dodi v'dodi li. You're putting it in. Imagine how much reward. You're davening anyways. You're going and you're doing chesed anyways. You're making a bracha the next time that you pick up a cup later, or your pizza, whatever it is that you're going to be eating later. Before you make that bracha, think for a second. Think for a second who you're making, who is God? How amazing it is. Bring that level of beloved. Bring that relationship. Make it real. That bracha is now worth 1,000 times greater. With that, I want to share with you a Gemara that I feel should be learned every Rosh Chodesh Elul. And I bring it up almost every year in my speeches because I feel it's so important. It's the Gemara on Rosh Hashanah that says that on Rosh Hashanah the entire world passes through God Kivnei Maron. And the Gemara brings down, what's Kivnei Maron? It brings down 3 different interpretations. Number 1, this is like sheep leaving a pen. You have sheep that are stuck and the owner wants to count it, let's say for Ma'asel. So he opens up a small opening and the sheep leave one by one. You can't count sheep while they're all moving because then you have to, did I count this one? It looks the same as that one. Okay? You can't do it that way. So they let it leave one at a time and you count, you mark it, whatever it is, and this way you count it. That's one reason the Gemara gives Kivnei Maron. Number 2, says it's like by King David's army, where you pick it, this person you're going over here, and this person you're going over here. Every soldier goes in a different battalion, every person, and the general is there as telling who to go where. And finally, the third pshat is that there's a house on Marom, and that's a very, very narrow path, very steep and narrow. And the only way that you're able to go up this path is only one at a time, single file. Says Rav Yitzchak Blazer. He says, I don't understand. Everything the Gemara just told over here denotes what? The same thing, single file. Sheep leaving single file. The soldiers going one at a time, single. The people going up the steep hill, single file. He says, why do we need 3 different understandings of the single file? Let's just make it very simple. Let the Gemara say, how does the whole world get judged before God? A single file, one at a time. The Gemara also brings down that who gets judged first, the king or the people? And the Gemara says the king. Why does the king get judged first? Because it shouldn't be that when that after all the people get judged and God is like sees all the sins of the entire world and says, oh, now the king is going to be in a bad mood, so to speak, and then the king is going to have a bad judgment. As for Yitzchak Blazer, what is this? God's moody? All of a sudden, if this one gets earlier, this one makes a difference. And Rabbi Yitzchak Blazer goes and answers something very, very important. He says the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu went and created judgment on Rosh Hashanah is everybody gets judged single file, one at a time. Why? It's because if everybody would get judged at the same time, then everybody will be in the same bucket. And the way that God did it is God made it in a way similar to the judge in this world. If you're going in front of a judge, if it's in the beginning of the day and the judge is in a good mood, be like, what? Okay, it's a speeding ticket. Okay, come on, it's good. I had a good coffee over here. The espresso was working well. Next. But imagine the 55th person comes in, speeding in the same place. Be like, how many people are speeding on this thing already? Enough. No, now you're going to start, paying the price. So the way God goes. God goes the first person. Okay, you did a little sin over here. You know what? Okay, fine. Obviously, everything is midah keneged midah. But, okay, a little bit of a lighter sentence. The next person will be like, wait a minute, you also spoke Lashon Hara? He also spoke Lashon Hara. What's going on over here? He says, no, it doesn't look so good. After the 1,000th person already, we're like, how many people are speaking Lashon Hara? How many people are doing so many avarot? The way that it works is that if you get in front of the line, you're going to have a better judgment. If you're going to get stuck at the back of the line, then you're going to have a more difficult judgment. If God would judge everybody at the same time, then what would happen? Everybody would be in the back of the line. Everybody gets judged the same thing. So God in His mercy made it, there's a way that you can have a better judgment. And how? That's if you get to the front of the line. The question is, so how do we get to the front of the line? So the answer is the Gemara, there's 3 ways. Way number 1 is like the sheep. What's the sheep? Which sheep gets to go first? The stronger the sheep, that sheep is able to leave first. Says the Gemara, you want to know who is going to be able to be judged first on Rosh Hashanah? The strong ones, the tzaddikim, the people that have a lot of mitzvot under their belt, they get judged first. Doesn't really help us. We're too close to Rosh Hashanah. We're going to start becoming a tzaddik. We don't got enough time. So, what's option number 2? Option number 2 is you have like King David's army, where the general picks this one and then that one. But the problem is that why do they pick this one? We don't know. There's a certain schut this one has, a certain schut that one has. And when you look at it, we don't know what schut brings you further. One schut brings you closer. You can have a rasha that goes in the front, a tzaddik that goes in the back. Only God has this calculation. It doesn't really help us. However, Kivnei Maron, the third shot is that it's a steep path. And it's one at a time that people are getting up in there. But the question is, how do people on a steep path, a narrow path, how do they get to go first? Very simple. The first one that shows up gets to go first. You think about that, you go into some sort of bank or some sort of supermarket. Who gets in front of the line? The one who's the wealthiest? No, the one who got there first. So too, says you want to get a good judgment? Get in line. How are you going to get in the front of the line? Start preparing earlier. Whoever prepares earlier gets in the line. Says, I'm waiting over here, God. I'm waiting for judgment day. You can see I'm preparing. So important. You want to have a good judgment? You want to have a successful year? This is the best secret that I could give you. Start preparing early. Because if you could just get in front of one person in line, you're already so much better. This, by the way, also proves that Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh LaZeh, we're all connected. One person can't say, oh, you know what? My sin has nothing to do with you. Be like, no. Especially if you get in front of me in line, that's going to make a big difference in my judgment. We all are connected, but if you have the ability to get that one step ahead, that's going to be all that so much better for you. The question is now, how are we going to do that? How are we going to get up ahead? So the Torah tells us, Chazal tells us, Elul, ani ledodi v'dodi li. If we start going and we start feeling the way that we do the mitzvot just a little bit differently, with a little bit of that emotion, of that beloved, of that joy that you're dealing with when you're doing a mitzvah, that's going to put you so much more ahead of the line. The Peleot brings down that ahava, love, and simcha, and happiness are one of the same. And the Shagas Arya brings down that there's a mitzvah to be, there's a special mitzvah that to be b'simcha on Rosh Hashanah. It's a hard mitzvah, it's Rosh Hashanah is when you're getting judged if you're going to live this year or you're going to die. But there's a special mitzvah on Rosh Hashanah that to be b'simcha. And not only that, the Chassam Sofer goes and says the merit, if you have the schut of having mitzvah on this day, will give you a good judgment. And our Victor Miller also says being happy is going to give you a favorable judgment. So the question is how do we get to that level of simcha? How do we get to the next time we make a bracha? How do we get to that level of ani ledodi v'dodi li? How do we get to the fact that I'm going to make this Judaism, something that's beloved to me? Not something that, I have to do, but something, I love it. I'm connected to it. Imagine 200 years ago, a wagon driver goes up to his fellow wagon driver and says, I want to tell you what Gan Eden is like. He says, you know what Gan Eden is? Gan Eden is you get to your wagon, but there's no horses pulling it. There's an engine. They're like, what's an engine? They're like, whatever, don't worry about it. And he says, not only that, in your wagon, there is something called shocks, that you don't feel the bumps. They're like, what's shocks? Don't interrupt me. And he says, not only that, in this wagon, there's air conditioning. No questions. And not only that, you could play music in this wagon. Be like, how big is this wagon that you could put an orchestra in there? Say, no. It goes with radio waves. Well, that's right. You don't ask any question. Just trust me. Gan Eden, imagine that. And then imagine that you could just punch in your destination and the car drives by itself. Like, you're on drugs. Like, what are you kidding me? That's not possible. Be like, no, yeah, that's really what it's like. And then there's another guy who says, yeah, and you know how your house is? You walk into your house, and you could just talk to a system, and it turns on your heat, or your air conditioning, or your refrigerator, or your microwave. You don't even have to do anything. You just talk, and it listens to you. You mean like a servant? Be like, kind of, but it's not real. It's just a machine. Be like, you're unbelievable. There's no way that's going to be. And it's like, oh yeah, and there's even better. Like, you don't have to go to the well to get water. You just like turn a knob in your house and water comes out. Like, there's no way. What are you kidding me? The water's just going to fall everywhere. How is that possible? And you go and you start explaining somebody from 200 years ago how you live your life today. Your clothing is dirty, go throw it into a washing machine, a little box that goes out dirty and comes out clean. It's unbelievable the way that we live our life. It's unbelievable that what we have. But the problem is that we're so used to it, our perception of reality, we're so used to it that it's like, I can't believe I don't have a washing machine in my house. I can't believe that my air conditioning is not working, for a day. And you get so upset and be like, you know what a bracha it is? Do we ever stop for a second? You're sitting here in a synagogue that's temperature controlled, that has good lighting, there's so much bracha over here. When was the last time that you went, thank you, God. Thank you to the president. Thank you to whoever is, running all the synagogue. There's so much that we take for granted because we're used to it. You look at the Torah. You open up a Sefer Bereshit. God created the world. Shouldn't your mind be blown by God created? That's crazy. The flood. Matan Torah. You start reading about this. This is unbelievable. But yet, we go through all the holidays, Pesach, Purim, all the crazy stories that happen to the Jewish people. And we're like, we sing it and we go through it and then, we move on with life. Do we ever stop for a second and be like, realize, look how amazing our lives are. Look how amazing and grateful and thankful we have to be to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what He has given us. When was the last time that you said thank you to God? When was the last time that you had that relationship? People come and they, tell me very often when they see like a new Baal Tshuva, somebody who just became, and they watch them pray, like it's one of the hidden tzaddikim. They even praying, they don't even know how to read, let's say, Hebrew. They're just reading in English. And they're just reading in there, but they sit for Shmona Esrei 45 minutes. I'll tell you, I have students personally, they told me the Shmona Esrei took them 45 minutes. And they would say every single word like that. They had and how they leave, they were on such a high, be like, I just prayed Shemona Esrei. High five. This is great. This is awesome, right? And a month goes by, still praying good. Let's see that person 2 years down the line. Before you even think he's finished already Shemona Esrei. What happened? How is it that in the beginning, you were so pumped, and then you just sort of fell out? And the answer is there's no freshness anymore. When you deal with love, when you deal with ahava, there's a certain infatuation stage where when you open up a siddur and you realize what you're dealing with over here, all of a sudden, this emotion rises up with you, and you're like, wait a minute, I can't, this is amazing. There's so much going on over here. How can I go fast? How can I skip words? You stop for a second and be like, this is unbelievable. So one way to get this is to start appreciating what you have. Start appreciating who you're talking to. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. You're dealing with God over here. You're dealing with God who has given you everything. You have a chance to talk to Him. You have a chance to make a bracha. You have a chance to say slichot. You have a chance to go and pray. Stop for a second and be like, this is so amazing. God, I love you. You're amazing. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. All that changes is just your perception. Rav Aaron Kotler brings down an interesting question. He says, there's two Gemarot. Why was the Bet HaMikdash destroyed? The Gemara in Yuma goes and says the first Bet HaMikdash was destroyed for the three cardinal sins: idolatry, immorality, and avodah zarah. No, we said that already. And shvichat damim. So you have the three big sins. That's why the first Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. The second, sinat chinam lashon hara. Then there's another Gemara in Nidarim that says, why was the Bet HaMikdash destroyed? It says, "Alazavtem etorati." You went and you left my Torah. Why did the Gemara goes and explains she'ein mevachim b'Torah tchila, that you didn't make a birkat Torah, you didn't make the blessings of the Torah beforehand. And the Ran brings down the Rabbeinu Yonah and says, why didn't we make the blessing of the Torah back then? It says because Torah wasn't so important to us. So asks Rav Aaron Kotler. He says this is a contradiction. Why was the Bet HaMikdash destroyed? Was it because of the sins, or was it because we didn't make the Torah important to us? So Rav Aaron Kotler goes and explains. So imagine a guy is driving on the highway, and his wife calls him up, and he's like, honey, we just won the lottery. We won $50 million. And he's like, what? It's like, it's unbelievable. Baruch Hashem, I'm giving so much to charity. It goes on and on. He's in heaven. He hangs up with his wife. He's driving. All of a sudden, a guy cuts him off right in the front. Now, if that guy would have cut him off 30 minutes earlier, it would have not been good for anybody in the vicinity. He would have waved a certain finger at him to say hi, and then he would have used some nice words to say hi and bye, and it just would have, changed a little bit his mood. But now this guy cut him off. He's like, oh, bechavod, yeah, go ahead. Who else wants to go? Yeah, go ahead. But imagine even more so. Someone, makes a short stop right in front of him. He makes a short stop, and someone, hits his, gets a little fender bender. Goes out, it's a brand new car, and he sees his entire, back is like crunched in. And the guy's like, I am so sorry. I can't believe I did this. I wasn't looking. I was on the phone. It's my fault. You could call insurance. I'll take care of it. The guy says, don't worry about it. Life is great. Don't worry. Relax. Don't worry about it. Go. Sasa. It's really, right? Good. Just go. What happened? Before, he would be like, are you kidding me? You know what this? I don't care about the insurance. I'm going to sue you and your family and your grandparents and I don't care if they're alive or dead. I'm suing everybody in the family. I don't care if you have an umbrella mortgage. I'm going to get everybody. And 5 minutes later, he has, all of a sudden, what changed? What changed? And now he doesn't care. And the answer is, he's in a good mood. He won the lottery. He's a millionaire now. He doesn't care about this stuff. Says Rav Aaron Kotler, why is it that the people were busy with sins, that they did avodah zarah, that they had, immorality, that they had shvichat damim? Why was it that they had? You want to know why? It's because they didn't feel the Torah as being so important. Because if they would have felt the Torah being so important, they wouldn't have time for anything else. They wouldn't have cared about anything else. If you're on a level that Torah is the most important thing in your life, then you couldn't care about anything else. You're living in the clouds. You are a multi-millionaire. That's how you feel. And your life is different. Be like, I'm lucky I'm a Jew. When was the last time you said, thank you, God, for making me Jewish? When was the last time, am I allowed to say this? Thank you, God, for making me Persian. Very good, tight-knit community. There's a lot of blessing that comes to it. When was the last time that you felt lucky for who you are, for the family that you were brought in, for the siblings that you have, for the parents that you have, and probably the most important, for your spouse? When was the last time that you felt lucky? And you have to ask that to yourself. And if it hasn't been in a while, then maybe you know why things are not as great as they ought to be. If we would just change our perception and say, Ani l'dodi v'dodi li, and we're coming to God and be like, I am to my beloved, I love you. I am so lucky to be over here. Guess what? The next time you're going to make a bracha and you feel lucky, it's a different bracha. You feel like you just won the lottery. The next time that you stand up to prayer, the next time that you say slichot, you're going to be in so much level of joy. So guess what? Everything that you just did, just times it by 1,000, because that's your reward. I want to finish off with one final story. There was a man who had business. He had, a bunch of kids. He was very busy, and he had a mother that has been a widow for 20 years. And, he would try to go and visit her, but with the family, with the business, he just couldn't get around to it. One day he decides, you know what? That's it. I got to go spend time with my mother. I haven't seen her in a long time. She's all alone. He calls his mother and says, hey, Ma, I want to go out, let's go out for dinner. And she's like, what's wrong? He's like, no, nothing's wrong. I just want to spend some time with you. She pauses for a long time. She's like, come on, what's wrong? Did you do something bad? What happened? He's like, no, I'm serious, Ma. Everything's okay. I just really want to just spend some time with you. And she's like, okay, that's great. They set up a date, and he comes to pick her up. This is an elderly woman. She has her coat ready. She did her hair. She did her makeup. And, she put on the last dress that she wore on the wedding anniversary 20 years prior with her and her husband. And she's so happy. And he opens the door, and there she is standing, beaming, gleaming like an angel, glowing. And she's like, I told my friends that I'm going out with my son tonight. They're so impressed. They're so interested to hear what we're going to do. And, she takes his hand like this, and they start walking out to the car. They get to the car, they get to the restaurant, small, simple restaurant, not expensive, and they ended up talking, and the time came to order the menu. The mother was a little bit old, she couldn't read the menu, so the son said, let me take care. And he reads her the menu, and as he's reading her, he looks up, she's smiling with a little tear in her eyes. She's like, is everything okay, Ma? What's going on? And she's like, I just remembered when you were little, I used to read you the menu. And he's like, okay, now let me return the favor. And they go, they order, they have amazing conversation, they catch up, simple stuff, nothing major, nothing, crazy change of events, just simple, normal day-to-day conversation. Afterwards, he goes, he drives her home, and she says, I had a really nice time. He says, I want to go out again, but on one condition, that I'm going to take you out. And he says, fine, you have yourself a deal. 3 days later, his mother had a heart attack and she passed away instantly. Like, he couldn't even do anything. And about a month or two goes by, and he gets a letter in the mail from the restaurant that he went to. And in there is, there's a receipt for a meal for two with a little note from his mother. And she says, I paid this in advance, a meal for two. I don't know if I was going to be able to be there. So if I'm not able to be there, this is going to be for you and your wife. But I just want to tell you one thing. He says, you have no idea what that night meant to me. He says, that meant to me more than everything in the world. She goes over and she writes, he says, that made me feel like $1 million. And she signs it off, I love you, son. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. If we realize the power of love, if we realize the power of ahava that we have, it could destroy and it could build worlds. We have the ability to come to Rosh Hashana over here, standing 1,000 feet in front of everybody else. You want to know how? I'm not saying take upon yourself anything new. If you want to, chazak b'ol, you should. But do what you're doing. But do it with ahava. Do it with ani ledodi v'dodi li. And Bezrat Hashem, with that, may we have a really aktiva v'chatima tova. May we have an amazing, successful judgment with us and the entire Klal Yisrael. And may we see the building of the Bet HaMikdash b'mehera b'yameinu.